Scorn is a solidly crafted survival horror puzzle game with fantastic art direction, sound design and music. But it's also a game that's absolutely not for everyone, in both some positive ways, founded on the clarity of the creative vision, and very negative ones, such as the complete lack of accessibility features. This is the very first IP from developers Ebb Software, founded in 2013 with what they say is the purpose of crafting a different breed of video games. In Scorn, they've certainly succeeded at that. When you're flung into the game world, it's immediately striking both how bleak and empty it is, and how that emptiness oozes with gore. There are moments where that's more explicit, of course, but there's a heavily visceral quality to every structure and mechanism of the world. You don't have to look very hard to see their membranes, musculature and mucus. Even if you're not familiar with biopunk as a genre of science fiction, you're probably aware of the works of H.R. Geiger, most notably Alien Xenomorph. The game wears the influence proudly, and it's not just the visuals which tell you you're in a biomechanical world, the sounds do as well. You can feel that everything is not so much alive as gasping for its last breath as it squelches, oozes and splutters to perform the operations you set it to. Biopunk as a genre tells stories rooted in worlds such as this, using them to explore heavily political themes around social control, profiteering and the misuse of biotechnology. These themes and critiques can be seen in the wasteful scattering of discarded life everywhere, and particularly in the broken down decadence of the final act. All of it is left for you to discover based on your exploration, as the entire story is told through the environment. There's not a single line of dialogue in the game, no explicit reason offered for anything. You can see and feel the horror, the tragic mournfulness of what little life remains, the coldness of your own actions as you mutilate that life in order to push inexorably forward, even while being pulled apart from within. But what it all means depends entirely on how you interpret it. The presentation is fantastic, driven by a clear artistic vision, and you can probably see in what I've described why it's not for everyone, especially if it's not for you. But if they had tried to make this for everyone, or build in a wider appeal, it certainly would have fallen short. Within all of that, the main gameplay mechanic to contend with are the puzzles. As in most classic survival horror, you're presented with a relatively open area and barriers to find your way past. To progress, you need to explore, interact with various devices and designs, until you unlock the way into the next area. This puzzle-driven exploration for the most part is well designed. No help or hint are on offer, and the level design can make it very easy to lose your bearings or get completely lost, reinforcing the isolation at the heart of this game. Some things will tax you more than others, but even they're quite simple in hindsight, and persistently investigating and interacting with everything is more likely than not to get you through eventually. It won't make it enjoyable if this kind of gameplay isn't your thing, and I can well imagine a lot of what I've just described sounding like a negative to many players. But if you enjoy isolated exploration and puzzle solving, then Scorn does it well. Unfortunately, this is undercut by the combat. Scorn isn't a combat-heavy game. In fact, you won't see any combat until Act 3, but that first showcase of enemy encounters is also the worst balanced and most frustrating. In Act 4 and 5, the guns available and the number of enemies feels better tuned. You have the classic survival horror choice of fight or flight, trading off ammo or possibly health and the time to safely explore an area, and although it's still far from perfect, it's fine. Even the one boss fight, or two, depending on how you look at it, at the end works once you figure out the puzzle of it. But in Act 3 there are too many enemies, and the only weapon you have is a prod gun with a terrible lack of precision. This largely forces you to flee rather than fight, but the distance at which the enemies can strike, and the absurd accuracy of what is essentially acid vomit as you're permanently rushing around. This makes it too easy to miss a well-disguised path and then get trapped in a corner, which you can't get out of because it seems the enemy collision meshes are far more blocky than the enemies themselves. This is also the first time you encounter healing items, and the game doesn't even tell you what they are or remind you to use them as most games might. It was only by looking at the controller layout on the pause screen that I realised there was a heal option, and by doing it that I realised the blood sacs you pour into a parasite you carry are the heals. Likewise with the bullets you get later. These are weird little capsules placed into the same parasite, and the game not only doesn't tell you they're bullets, it never reminds you to load, nor does it automatically trigger a reload animation if you fire an empty gun. You have to do it yourself, and the animation is slow and deliberate, whilst the character slows to a walk while doing it. All of this has a design purpose, feeding into the broader sense of being flung into the world, but it's easy to see how this will mess up a fair amount of players. Sure, games didn't always used to have tutorial levels or on-screen prompts for healing and reloading, but they used to have manuals to read instead, which Scorn doesn't. Act 3 in particular then becomes an exercise in bloody mind and persistence rather than anything else, and far more frustrating than fun. With fewer enemies and some tweaks to their projectile range and your ability to get past them in a tight corner, even if it still means taking a hit, this could work a lot better, rather than being a pinch point likely to see a lot of players weighing up whether it's worth playing on. Overall, I do think it is, but if there are to be changes to the game in patches, then the balance in Act 3 has to be part of that. The biggest disappointment of the game, however, is in the accessibility, or rather lack thereof. I've already said that Scorn isn't for everyone, and that it's to the game's benefit that it isn't. But that doesn't mean that it has to put up a hard barrier to players who may well be into exactly what Scorn is offering, except that they have an impairment which affects their ability to experience it. There are no audio descriptions or navigation assistance for blind or partially sighted players. Even though there's no dialogue, a lack of closed captions and direction indicators will still affect those who cannot hear audio cues in the game properly. Players with motor function issues have no option to set a button to toggle rather than hold, which will cause problems when you have to hold B to leave a machine or hold down the left bumper to run. Even very basic stuff like full controller remapping isn't available. You can do this via the console itself, but that shouldn't absolve the devs of responsibility for implementing it so you can customize the controls for one game rather than having to redo it every time you switch games. On the whole, Ebb Software have created something intriguing in a world whose design is beautifully macabre and whose story is both grotesquely tragic and uniquely told. It falls short of true greatness because of the poor balance in its combat and for failing to pull down the barriers to their creation faced by disabled players. If those things are addressed in future updates, then it'll become hard to say a bad word about it, unless you're squeamish. I want to know what you think. If you've played Scorn, did you enjoy it, or was it not your cup of tea? If you haven't, will you be picking her up? Leave a comment and let me know. If you enjoyed this video, then give it a like and consider subscribing to keep up to date with all my content, like the video that's just popped up which YouTube thinks you should watch next. Check out the links in the description to join my Patreon for as little as £1 per month, or donate to my GoFundMe and get your name in the credits of my videos, like those rolling up now, who I want to thank for supporting me and my content. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.